Is the market crashing? Is it just a correction? So many videos on this topic recently coming from the English content creator space, specifically the investing content creator space. And I figured it's finally time to make this video. Today, I prepared an in-depth Google Sheets presentation looking at the Japanese boom and bust of 22 and 23. I'm using the Japanese boom and bust as an example for a couple of reasons. Number one, in the English investing creator space, a lot of people say things with a lot of confidence, a lot of conviction, very strong statements. This can't happen. How could this possibly happen? Stuff like that. And I'll show examples from the Japanese boom and bust of how the things that are impossible to happen actually happened. And also I want to do this because nobody's talking about the Japanese boom and bust for some reason, even though I think it's very relevant. It's only very recent. Yeah, I don't really hear people talk about it. There's some one-off comments here and there sometimes about the Japanese crash, but I kind of noticed that a lot of people misremember it. I was in Japan back then. I'm still in Japan now, so I experienced it firsthand on the ground over here, so I might have a bit of a different perspective. But I think the content today is relevant to people who are in the hobby and have any sort of remote interest in the financial aspect. I don't care if you're an investor or if you collect. I consider myself a collector first, but collectors, we care about value. At the very least when it comes to buying stuff. We don't want to buy something when it's at an all-time high and then is low down for 3 years afterwards or something like that, right? Just a stupid example. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting video. So sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, and let's look at the Google Slides presentation. Lessons from the Japanese boom and bust, what many aren't talking about. Sounds dramatic, but I think it is relevant and interesting. First, a few disclaimers. I gotta get these out of the way. I think it's very important. Obviously, I cannot predict the future. I am simply sharing relevant information from the past, the recent past. Do with that information what you will. You can think it's extremely important. You can say it doesn't matter. I don't really care. I just want to get this information out there because people aren't sharing it, people aren't talking about it, and I think it is, relevant. I think it's very relevant, but even if you don't think it's that important, it's at least a little bit relevant. Come on, okay? Okay, second disclaimer. The point of this video is not to instill fear. This is not fear mongering. This is not a doom and gloom type of video. I'm very, optimistic about Pokemon long term. Being in Japan, seeing how it's part of everyday culture and all that stuff, obviously, right? It's just important to get this information out there so people have all the information at their disposal, or as much as possible. I don't have all the information. I don't know everything, obviously. Right? And then number three, very importantly here, although I refer to some things others have said, I'll use some people as examples, statements coming from some people, maybe. I'm simply offering counterpoints to their perspectives. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, and I definitely hold no ill will towards anyone. Please, no drama. I encourage comments. I welcome comments of all opinions as long as they are polite. No drama, please. It really isn't that, okay? This is very chill. It's just interesting information. Okay, so here's my brief outline for today. Number one, I'll talk about what actually happened. Right? What happened with the Japanese boom and bust? What went on? And then I want to go into some of the statements that I mentioned at the beginning. Some of the things that people say that I think lack nuance. Things that are being said with a lot of confidence, but that, examples from the Japanese boom and bust show are missing nuance. I want to talk about if this market is the new norm. That's something a lot of people say too, right? This is just the new norm. I also want to acknowledge the differences between Japanese and English. That's important too. Although I think this is relevant, there are notable differences. It's all Pokemon, but the markets are not identical, clearly. And of course, I'll have my final thoughts at the end. So what happened? Let's get started. So this is from pokeka-chart.com. It's a Japanese website where they kind of call it an index of cards. It's an index of popular cards, and this is the chart for PSA 10s. And we can see the insane boom and the subsequent crash that happened. And this is the same chart, but this is for near mint singles. Looks a little bit different. Not as extreme as the PSA 10 one, but it kind of shows the same thing overall. Now here's a timeline, okay? Looking back at the PSA 10 chart, I included the rough timing for the set releases of these sets, just to give you an idea of what kind of sets came out during this time, at what point did they come out. I'm not saying that these little spikes are directly related to the sets, although I think there is some connection. If you look at that spike with Paradigm Trigger, that's when the Lugia Alt Art, of course, came out. That was unbelievably expensive right on release before it came down. And we can also see that the market started crashing around the release of 151, which is interesting as well. It crashed despite an insane set coming out. So just wanted to give you an idea of the rough timeline here. And during this time, it was pretty desperate in Japan. There were no packs. The Pokemon centers, the physical Pokemon centers, did not have packs for almost a year. That is insane. Imagine you come to Japan with your family on vacation, you want to go to the Pokemon Center to pick up a few packs, and they just didn't have anything for a year. Of course, the lotteries during this time were basically impossible to win. Now, today, we're kind of back in a boom, and lotteries are, once again, almost impossible to win, but at least packs are more readily available, here and there in Japan. So I think it's much better than it was last time, but this time was bad. And the crazy thing, too, was that during this time, not even the card stores had packs. Right? Nowadays, you see a lot of card stores that have the most recent sets, they'll just have them at market price. Back then, they didn't even have them at market price. It was pretty nuts. I remember going to a store around, this is Vista Universe release time, and there was just nothing in the store I usually went to. I went to a few other stores, they had absolutely no packs. I think I found one store that had like 2 packs for sale, but it was just empty. And around that same time, I was watching content creators out of the US. I remember watching this one guy, I forgot his name, but he went to this, middle of nowhere LGS somewhere in Texas, and they just had a display case full of the most recent Japanese sets. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I mean, it was bad in Japan at that time. And I'm going back to this chart right here with the boxes because I remember this boom as starting right after Lost Abyss came out, around that time at least. Lost Abyss was the last box I was able to get in person in a store on release day by just walking in and picking up a box. In between Lost Abyss and Paradigm Trigger, we had the Incandescent Arcana release. I still went to the store on release day. That day, there was a huge line. The person in front of me got the last box. That's it. From that moment on, until sometime after Ruler of the Black Flame, a year later, there's just nothing, no chance. I eventually stopped going because it just wasn't worth my time anymore. It's just like, this is silly. Why even bother? But that's why I'm saying it started around Lost Abyss. That's when we started seeing crazy high prices for new chase cards. That's when the product became unavailable. That's when the Pokemon Center Online sold out. For a while, there was still Pokemon Go and Dark Phantasma in stock, but even that eventually went away. And so it really was about a year of this thing going absolutely nuts. And I want to show this one here. So I put in this little marker here to show a date. So this is June 16th, 2023. I picked this one because this is the release day of 151. And I'll come back to this date throughout this video. Just this, I wanted to pick like one moment in time that we can refer back to. And I picked the 151 release date, which is, essentially at the peak of the market, June 16th. So we'll come back to this date throughout this video. Now, what was booming? What was going on? Well, I'll show this card. This is the sites here from Tag All Stars. And you can see this chart is also from pokecard.chart.com, just looking into an individual card. The green line is the PSA 10 price. The blue line is the near mint price. And then the orange line is the kind of damaged raw card price. That can range massively, obviously. But I think the two most interesting ones are going to be the PSA 10 and the near mint. And we can kind of see this general trend of overall PSA 10s repeat itself with the sites here, all-time high going for almost 600,000 yen, to then a year later the card being somewhere around 150,000 yen. Ridiculous. But I pick this card as the first example because one thing I hear people say a lot, and this is one of the things that people get wrong about the Japanese boom and bust. They talk about the waifu boom, and they talk about it being a 1 month, 2 month thing, and it's just not the reality. It was not just a month-long waifu boom. Many other cards boomed, and looking at this again, it lasted about a year, and it started with Lost Abyss in July 2022. I was on the ground in Japan. That's when things became unavailable. That's when prices started going sky high and things sold out everywhere. Boxes, singles, you name it. Right? It started here and it ended here. About a year, well, this is about a year here, right? But I call it a year and a half long period, all things considered, roughly speaking. But, Japanese boom bust, I say it was a year-long period. And so here are some examples of how this wasn't just a waifu boom. Sun and Moon Alt Arts went crazy during that time. We can see again around the peak, the Mewtwo and Mew Alt Art going for over 250,000 yen in a 10, crashing back down. Now it's back up again. This is also very interesting, by the way. A lot of stuff is back up. And I might refer to that here and there today, but that would be a topic for another video. There's just too much to talk about. But Sun and Moon Alt Arts boomed. Right? Here's another example. The Stained Glass Bird Trio went insanely high in a PSA 10 and then came down. This is a screenshot I took from a Discord message I sent on June 10th. So again, this date, keep this date in mind. This is June 10th, 2023. I shared a screenshot in the Pokemonomics Discord of 25th anniversary Mew EXs in a PSA 10 selling for over 70,000 yen. Absolutely insane. It wasn't just a waifu boom. Here's an interesting one. The Mario Pikachu, it went up significantly, but I mean, look at it now. It's absolutely crazy where this card is at right now. But it as well, during the time, we saw new record highs, it going very, very high, about 1.2 million yen. Of course, I have to include the Umbreon VMAX, right? I have to include it. Ridiculous as well, sky high prices at the peak. And it has still not gotten back to where it was at back in the early summer of 23. I wanted to include these two cards as well because they're very interesting, right? When the Giratina V Lost Abyss, when I say that kind of started the whole madness, you can see early on it was still somewhat affordable. I mean, context is relevant here. At that time, this price of it was around 30,000 yen here. This felt very expensive, right? But looking back, it actually was a good price. Crazy to think. But this was still early. The boom kind of started happening later. The Lugia, I don't know why this image is flipped, sorry about that, mirrored. But the Lugia, came out stupid high and then came back down, spiked again during the peak. But I thought these were interesting as well. Sort of, just two very popular cards that came out at the beginning of the boom and how they were kind of behaved differently. So this is what happened during that time. Okay, I'm not going to talk about why it happened, why it boomed, why it crashed. I might say some things here and there, but that's a topic for another video. There's a lot to talk about there, and I know a lot, but I don't know everything. But that's also very interesting. But yeah, it was about a year long. It wasn't just a waifu boom. A lot of things got very, very expensive during that time, only for them to come back crashing down. All right, let's look at some of these statements that lacking nuance. It sounds dramatic, it really isn't. But something I've been hearing a lot is the argument that Pokemon can't print enough. How can they possibly print enough? Sets going out of print, sets that are near out of print, there's no way they can print enough to keep up with the demand for the new sets. And also, increase the supply for these soon to be out of print sets. And to me, this is a very strong, opinionated statement that, well, it lacks nuance because the reality is, yes, they can. They can print more if they want to. The question is, do they want to? And how long would it take them? They do not want to print everything into the ground. That could end very, very bad, very poorly. But they can. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. If they want to buy a couple of printing facilities, of course they can. And here, the example from Japan is relevant because during this time, demand for Japanese cards increased in Japan, obviously, but there was a massive surge in demand coming from outside of Japan. So Pokemon Japan had to account for, print for, an increased demand within the country, but also all this new demand coming from outside of Japan. Now, before this time, of course, certain Japanese sets were very popular outside of Japan. There was definitely demand, and more demand than, let's say, pre-2020, of course. But the Japanese becoming as mainstream as it is today really started around this time. Even a set like VMAX Climax was really readily available, in early 22, in the spring of 22. It was below retail. And so they had to start printing more, significantly more, and they managed to do it. We are booming right now again, but it's not nearly as bad as it was back then. They somehow pulled it off. And of course, they also, during this time-ish, they started ramping up production for, or printing for Chinese cards, which are printed in Japan. So Pokemon Japan managed to start printing a whole lot more. You can look at the PSA pop reports of the PSA 10 pops from like the most recent sets compared to the earlier stuff. It's very obvious that they're printing out so much more. And if Japan can do it, there's no reason TPCI can't do it. Right? This idea that it's physically impossible is just not the case. Again, the question is, do they want to, and how long would it take them? This is another important point here that's related to the reprints. Reprints matter, obviously, but they're not always necessary. Pokemon doesn't need to reprint every set for sealed prices to potentially come down. This is another one of those things where people have this idea that the only way these out-of-print or soon-to-be out-of-print boxes can come down in price is if there are reprints. And the Japanese boom and bust example shows us that that is just not always really necessary. So I wanted to start with these two boxes as an example. Lost Abyss released July 15th, 22. 151 released June 16th, 23. I think these two boxes are very good examples of boxes coming down in price because of a reprint. If we look at Lost Abyss right here, this, by the way, wasn't even the reprint yet. I think this was just the news of a reprint, dropped the price in half. Japanese is kind of nuts like that. But the reprint really did bring the price of this box down, and it came almost 2 years after the set had been released. It was Lost Abyss, Incandescent Arcana, and Paradigm Trigger got reprinted during the time. Almost out of print, almost out of rotation, relatively big reprint. Brought the price down. People were surprised. I was surprised. No one was expecting it. But really, if you think back, it shouldn't have been a surprise. When these sets were going crazy early on, when they were released, when the boom started, Pokemon Japan released a statement saying, hey guys, don't worry, there'll be more of this stuff. And people just forgot about the statement because eventually there was more of it. It just took them almost 2 years. 151, another good example that had the huge reprint waves in early summer, spring 24, again, bringing the price down significantly. So these are examples of what people expect reprints to do and sort of examples that show, hey, look, you need reprints for prices to come down. Well, here are some examples that don't really support this argument entirely, right? Starbirth, released January 14, 22. Again, here I'm showing the date, June 16th is when the crash for PSA 10s and singles was kind of happening, right? Starbirth eventually came down in price. This is July 24 here. It was a little more expensive than before, before the boom kind of started around here-ish, right? So it didn't come down all the way back to pre-boom prices, but it came down significantly. You can kind of see the line in the back here. It's a little bit obscured, sorry about that, but Starbirth came down in price significantly. And Starbirth wasn't reprinted. Why did it come down? Because the market crashed. Call it a correction, call it a crash. I don't really care. Semantics, right? At what percentage is it a crash? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50? Does it something have to come down 100% for people to call it a crash? I don't really care about that. All that matters is that the price came down, what I would call significantly. And this set did not get reprinted. Shiny Star V, another interesting example. Released November 20th, 2020. Sorry about that. Once again, I picked this date here. This is, well, June 17th here. And it stayed relatively consistent here for like half a year, right? And then it came down big time. And this set, you could argue, went to the it's pretty clear that it went to the pre-boom prices. This is July 1st right here, right? 22. And then this is July 1st, 24. So in two years, it went back to where it was before the boom even started. If you pick the very bottom, you could even argue it went below the pre-boom prices. Now, Shiny Star V, I get it. It's not a very good set. It's a bit of a stinker. It's a beautiful box, but it's a bit of a stinker. But ask yourself, is every set in English that has gone up an amazing set? Not really, right? Let's look at a good set then. VMAX Climax, an incredible set, unbelievable set. Released December 3rd, 21. Again, showing June 16th right here, where it was just below 20,000 yen. Went up, and then came down big time. It didn't go back to pre-boom prices, but it lost about half its value, a little more than half its value, right, over this period, within a year, right? No reprints for, VMAX Climax. I forgot to mention, but obviously no reprints for Shiny Star V during this time. It came down in price. No reprints, came down in price. EV Heroes, another very, very popular set. There's a couple of insane sales. These charts are, by the way, are from Sneaker Dunk. So these are all confirmed sales. When stupid high at peak boom, came down, then kind of corrected itself, and then came down pretty hardcore. This little dip right here, this was a reprint scare. Some fake news made the rounds. I don't know where it came from. Manipulation, I don't know, but this was this little dip right here. Clearly didn't go back to pre-boom prices, which would have been around here, obviously. A very strong set, very popular set, and up significantly now. Holy crap. But even EV Heroes came down. If you look here, 65,000 yen to somewhere in the, I don't know, call it 40,000 yen. It's significant. Pokemon does not need to reprint every set for sealed prices to calm down. All the examples I showed, only Lost Abyss and 151 were reprinted during the boom and bust period. All these other sets did not get any reprints during that time. And they all came down in price. Why? Once again, because the market as a whole crashed. All right, next statement. Statement lacking nuance. Everyone would just buy more if product gets cheaper. This is something you hear all the time. I've heard it in videos. I see it in comments. Well, if stuff gets cheaper, I'm ready to spend my money. I got all this capital saved up, ready to spend. Or similarly, there are these people out there with hundreds of thousands of dollars ready to go who are just waiting for opportunities to buy, or who wouldn't even allow the market to crash. Everyone would just buy more if product gets cheaper. I'll just pick this card as an example. It's like a random card right here. I mean, it's a cool card. It's not a random card in it. It's just a card as an example. If you look at the chart, these gray lines right here, these gray vertical lines, those are the number of sales. When the card was expensive, there were a lot of sales. When it was relatively cheap, very few sales. I think Dan Ketchum Collectibles has said this many times. If something's expensive, everyone wants it. When it's cheap, nobody wants it. So this just shows that, prices came down and people stopped buying as much. There weren't enough buyers in the hobby to just buy as it went down to prevent the crash from happening or all this stuff. Right? Some people bought here and they're looking pretty happy right now, of course. Right? But this idea that like a crash can be prevented because there are enough people who will just buy as the price goes down, and it's not how it works. When things lose value and it looks dramatic like this, people stop buying. Okay, another one. Yeah, so this one I heard recently. Look at the low supply on eBay. People aren't selling. I thought this was an interesting one. And so this is coming from Nostalgianomics, and I have absolutely nothing against Nostalgianomics. It's like, love him or hate him, he's got his opinions. It's all fair and game, right? But this is something he said I thought was interesting to look at. And he actually used a few examples, but this is one example he picked to show that, look at the low supply, people aren't selling, it's a strong market. And I kind of tried to recreate his findings here. I used the same search terms. I even used the same zip code. I sorted it the same way that he did. But this is one of the examples from his videos. It's the Rocket Mewtwo SIR in a 10. And his argument was, I think in his video, there were like 49 results. He's like, look, there's only 49 for sale. People aren't selling. And then I was like, well, how many have sold? 454 sales. So clearly the card is selling, but that's not a gotcha type of thing right here. I'm surprised he didn't show this, because to me, this shows, hey, this is a very popular card. It's a very strong card. People are willing to pay a whole lot of money for this card. So I think he could have easily shown this. I don't think this contradicts his argument, but I just want to talk about this more in a general term, right? This idea that everyone's holding on to this stuff, investing in it, collecting it, people aren't selling. How can prices come down if people aren't selling? And I picked this card as an example here, the 25th anniversary Charizard. I picked it because I think this is a very popular card. Nobody can argue that this is not a popular card. This is arguably the best version of the 25th anniversary celebrations Charizard. Very popular, and a lot of 10s, of course. But it's kind of the same story that I talked about earlier, with the Zapdos Moltres Articuno alt art. A good number of sales when it was doing well, and then not a lot of sales when it was kind of at its bottom right here. And from my own experience back then, I can tell you, because I was looking at this card, I had graded a couple at the time. I was considering grading another one. I was keeping track of the pop reports, looking at the prices and stuff. So I'm very in tune with what happened during this card during that time. And there were a lot of sales around here and very little for sale. Right? So when you went to Medicati, for example, any given day, there would be between like 1 and 10 PSA 10s for sale. And I could have sat there and made a video like, oh my God, look, there's only 10 for sale. People aren't selling the card. It's not available. The supply is so low. It's like, well, one of the reasons why there were so few for sale is because so many were being bought. Right? But then also, when it was cheap, there were a lot for sale. Dozens and dozens and dozens of PSA 10s. During this time, so many available for sale. And it's no surprise. When the market is hot and prices go up and things are expensive and popular and in demand, then people hold on to it. They keep it in their collection. They keep it as an investment. But that doesn't mean that someday in the future, a card can not become somehow more available. All right. So here is a couple other statements that he made in the same video. This stuff is going out of print soon. How is it even humanly possible to get enough of these cards on the market to bring the price down? Pop reports of 1K, 10K, 20K are irrelevant if nobody's selling ever. How did the price of this card come down? It didn't get reprinted. If you say here, going out of print soon, how is it even humanly possible to get enough of these cards on the market to bring the price down? Well, it happened right here. Enough of these came on the market to bring the price down from 90,000 yen down to 20,000 yen. And many more were for sale here than here. There wasn't Japanese 25th anniversary promo packs were not reprinted during this time. Right? So it is humanly possible. It happened, not that long ago with this card, which is a very, very popular card. The pop reports, 1K, 10K, 20K, irrelevant if nobody's selling. Well, this card having at this time around 15 to 20,000 PSA 10s was relevant, because that meant a lot of copies were out there to hit the market. and bring prices down. I will say, actually, like this is an interesting point. The 1K, I think the 1K matters in this market. This is something I'll talk about later. Is the low pop English chase cards that are very hard to grade. I think that's a relevant little piece of information right here. But again, this idea that there is low supply right now, and this supply can only increase somehow if something gets reprinted. It's just not what happened. This is one example. I could throw up all these other cards that are out of print that went down in price and had relatively few sales at the bottom. Many for sale. Actually, I'll have an example in just a second, like an actual physical copy right here. So essentially, cards that seemed gone, little supply, sold out, they returned, and many of those came back at lower prices than pre-boom. Even vintage mid-era cards and stuff I looked at eyeing up for the personal collection for my Japanese promo binder. During the boom, I was like, oh man, all this stuff is just sold out. No card shop has the card anymore. There's like 3 for sale on Medicati, but they're all too expensive for the condition that they're in. Man, this stuff is gone. It's GG. And then a year later, suddenly there's 20 for sale on Medicati. So stuff can come back. I'll use this as an example. It's the Altaria CHR. It was affected by the waifu craze. It's technically not a waifu card. It's an Altaria CHR, but whatever. But this is a card that went dummy high. A PSA 10 over 25,000 yen at the peak, and some people on YouTube were making big plays with this card, buying many copies, and it was just always sold out. Whenever Card Rush would restock it, it would sell out. They restock it at a higher price, sell out, bought out. A few copies on Medicati for sale. The ones that were for sale were either overpriced or had bad centering or some questionable photos. This card, during the boom, seemed gone, unavailable. It's GG, right? This is a screenshot from Card Rush, October 16th, so just a couple of days ago of me recording this video. They had 50 raw copies in stock in their top condition. 50 in stock at 1,180 yen. So a card that seemed almost gone, that was just bought. It's readily available today. And here's the example I wanted to use. It's a PSA 10 I picked up in one of my card shopping videos, actually, in Magi, Shibuya. This was Shibuya, card shopping in Shibuya. It's a PSA 10, and you can see I kept it in the original sleeve that I bought it in for the meme because I think it's hilarious. And it's a reminder. Right? The price tag on it, 3,000 yen. And this was sometime in 24. And that monkey they had a stack of these 10s for sale. I just picked the top one, whatever. A stack for sale in 10s. And yeah, it's hilarious in a way. It's a meme at this point. When this card was hot, it was selling like crazy at very high prices, low availability, low supply, and on any platform in Japan. And 2 days ago, Card Rush had 50 raw copies, and the raw card is still cheap. It went up a little bit recently, 7,500 yen-ish, but look at, 3,000 yen. At this time, this was the price of the grading fee plus the raw card. This is zero margin grading this card during this time. Yeah, crazy to think, right? So just reiterating with these examples that just because there's low supply right now does not mean that supply cannot increase in the future. Okay, let's talk about, is this the new norm? Are things different this time? And I picked a few sort of examples, things that I hear being said as to why this is different now. This is now the new norm. And I want to tell you why none of this is really any different. Let's start with rip and ships. This is a big one right now. You hear a lot of arguments like, well, the market is so different now, the rip and ships are absolutely crazy. Rip and ships were a big deal during the Japanese boom. I think it's a fair point to make that rip and ships are bigger than ever. I think that's a very fair point to make. But Rip and chips were a big deal during the Japanese boom. Ask any streamer who streamed Japanese packs of new sets, like V-Star Universe, for example. I mean, this stuff was going ham in the rip and chips. And although things might be bigger now than they were back then, it was a big deal at the time. And rip and chips didn't prevent the market from crashing. Another very interesting one, I just learned about this recently, Instant Rips mystery type of product. Dan Ketchumwell Collectibles talked about this in a video. Fanatics Instant Rips, the idea is that these are digital mystery packs for slabs. You join a stream, you buy into it, it gets ripped digitally on stream, and you get some sort of slab. Right? It's a mystery product, Instant Rips, digital mystery pack, whatever you want to call it. And Dan used it as an example as to why the market is booming. I mean, if I remember correctly, he mentioned it's one of the reasons why the market is so crazy right now. He didn't say it's the reason. Right? He also didn't say that it will prevent the crash. I want to make it very, very clear. He just mentioned, hey, look, this is an example that is contributing to this craze right now. Instant Rip type of stuff, these digital mystery packs have been around in Japan for years. Here is a little screenshot from a Discord message where I wrote, it is June 13th. So again, this timeline is always funny. Where I was writing about getting bombarded with Japanese mystery pack ads on my Instagram account. This is a screenshot from Clove. Clove is it's one of the bigger ones. It's one of the most famous ones. These are digital mystery packs, and they work in the same way that like Instant Rip work, in the sense of like you win something and you can either have it shipped to you or you can sell it back to the company, right? And I'm on the Clove page right now. I just wanted to show you this. This is just one example, right? You can see like the top prizes, how much they're worth, the second tier prizes, some extra prizes are in there, third tier prizes, fourth tier prizes. Then there's a last one prize. Japan Mystery Packs always has a last one, meaning that the last person to spend money on this mystery pack is guaranteed to get the last prize. So people try to time it. And of course in Japan has interesting gambling laws, so it all works with points or coins. You're not spending real money. Of course you are. You can convert it to real money. But it's essentially the same product. I would say like Instant Rips is probably more transparent because this just like shows examples of stuff you can get. Like Sonohokahari. So there are different ones. Instant Rips, definitely more transparent than what's happening here in Japan. But the concept of this product is the same thing. It's online digital gambling for slabs that you can have sent to you or sell back to the company. And this stuff was huge during the Japanese boom. And this is 2.5 years ago. I remember thinking at the time, I'm surprised nobody's doing this in English. And it took the English side of things a couple of years to start doing it. It's just now kind of becoming a big deal in the US, right? And these companies, just like they are right now in the English market, were responsible for buying a lot of slabs on the market. A lot of PSA 10s went to these type of companies like Clove. And relevant too, at the time, there was a bit of a slab shortage in Japan. PSA Japan, the Japanese office, wasn't grading on site yet. You still had to submit to them. They would send the cards to the US to be graded, and then they would come back to them and then to you. And it was an 8-month turnaround time. I submitted a few times during the time. It was incredibly long, very slow. And so when the market started booming, there was a bit of a supply shortage for slabs, and it was probably one of the reasons why prices went up, one of many reasons. But yeah, these companies, they were buying slabs, buying, large quantities. But the market still crashed, despite this product being a big deal. Again, I want to reiterate, Dan Ketchumwell Collectibles is not saying the market can't crash because of Instant Rips and product like it, but it's an argument why the market is doing well. And it was one of the reasons why the market was doing well in Japanese, but it still crashed. Crypto money in Wales, investors have discovered the hobby. I've kind of lobbed these two together. Look, people were saying the exact same thing back with the Japanese stuff. It's the same arguments. Japanese is booming. Oh, it's all the crypto money coming into Pokemon. There's all these whales, Chinese buyers, billionaires buying all this stuff. Or, investing is now mainstream. Same arguments, the market still crashed. Is there more crypto money in Pokemon now? More whales with more money? Is investing more mainstream than it was back then? Probably yes to all of that, right? But even though people were saying this stuff back then, the market still crashed. Pokemon is the biggest IP. This is one that's quite interesting to me because it's obviously true. Biggest media franchise, biggest IP, whatever, right? And that's obviously a very positive thing for Pokemon cards long term. I've mentioned it. I don't know if I mentioned it already here today, but when I talked to Chuck Nasty, we talked about how Pokemon in Japan is part of Japanese culture now. It's everywhere. The other day I went to the supermarket and they had Pokemon-themed Ziploc bags and Pokemon-themed curry. It's everywhere, right? It's huge. But the nuance here is that just because Pokemon is the biggest IP does not guarantee that the cards do well. Pokemon being the biggest IP cannot prevent a crash. Cards are part of the IP, but there are the video games, the anime, all the merchandise. You go to a Pokemon Center in Japan, people buy packs and people go there to buy packs. But you look at what most people are buying, they're buying plushies and pencil boxes and cookies and all this other stuff and stickers, right? The Pokemon IP truly is massive, but it is so much more than just the cards. And the Pokemon as an IP, the Pokemon IP can continue to do well and can get more popular into the future, while at the same time the cards could stay stagnant or go down. That can happen. Just because it's the biggest IP does not guarantee that the cards will remain as popular as they are now or that they will be more popular. Pokemon was the biggest IP when the Japanese market crashed. Right. All right, brand new sets being this expensive is another one I've heard. Why things are different now. We've never had new sets being this expensive. Everything is different now. Japanese sets, you look at it, right? Clayburst came out extremely expensive. Milady X came out expensive and then went even higher. Brand new sets being expensive is nothing new to Japanese. Right? Japanese sets being double, triple, quadruple MSRP is old news now. It's nothing new. It's new in English, and that matters. That's a big deal, I think. But it's nothing new. And the prices still came down. Just because the sets are now so expensive on release doesn't mean it's a new norm. Right? Because, sometime after this, all Japanese new sets were at retail or below. A couple more examples. Triplet Beat came out very expensive, then went down, went up, and then came down during the crash. Over the period of about a year, came down. 151, obviously, an interesting example. Stayed expensive even during the crash. Stayed expensive to eventually come down. Right? Just an example, new sets being expensive, nothing new. And yes, the numbers might not seem that crazy if you look at something like Violet EX, being, 12,000 yen, 17,000 yen. In US dollars, that's not that much. But, what multiplier it is of the MSRP, the retail price, this is very significant. Again, we're talking, at 15,000 yen, 16, 17,000 yen, we're talking like triple retail. 3x MSRP is insane. Right? So if you look at it that way, it feels different. Bulk cards getting expensive. Now this is actually, I wasn't sure if I wanted to include this one because I think this is more of an argument people use to talk about the top signal. This is a top signal. it's GG, right? But I thought it was interesting because it's something that's like, being talked about. It happened during the COVID boom as well with English. But I just felt like it's another interesting comparison to the Japanese market of something that's happening now in English that happened in Japanese back then. 25th anniversary Mew, PSA 10 going for 116,000 yen. It's all in yen for me because I live in Japan, but we all know it's a silly number, right? It's a bulk card. Maybe it's hard to grade, but it's a bulk card. Japanese, 25th anniversary, so kind of from the same set, just a different language, right? We have the Cosmo and reverse foil, just one example I picked. I really like the 25th anniversary reverse foil, by the way. I think they look dope. But then here, I found on PSA, July 3rd, 23, PSA 10 auctioned off for $212. And then, a few months later, 44. Here's a screenshot I took, June 14th, 23. Again, in the Discord that I'm in, 130,000 yen for a 10. Same seller sold 3 total, all above 100K. Gotta be a fake sale. I couldn't believe it. This stuff was so insane. It seemed fake, right? Was it fake? I'm not sure. It's a cool card. I love the Japanese 25th anniversary reverse holos, but this card is not 130,000 yen levels of cool in a PSA 10. I just wanted to bring this up because people might say, look how much money people are paying now for these, kind of bulkish type of cards that are, hard to grade. The same thing happened to Japanese. Bulk cards being dummy expensive. I'll say the difference here, notable difference, this card is probably significantly harder to grade than this card, right? But still, it's a bulk card, right? Speaking about differences, let's acknowledge some differences between Japanese and English. And I think, these are differences that matter. The markets are not identical. There are notable differences, and I'm totally happy to address those. I might have my opinion and my examples today, but I'm totally happy to bring up the points that sort of maybe contradict what I'm saying, right? PSA population. Obviously, English cards are harder to grade. These ultra-modern SIRs in English, right? Or illustration rares, like the Magic card, for example. They are very, very difficult to grade, whereas the Japanese equivalents are all relatively easy to grade. And so that is definitely a difference that matters. How much that has an impact on these greater market movements, I'm not sure, but it's a difference that matters. I think there are main product differences. With Japanese, the main product is the booster box or the booster packs that comes in a booster box. Japanese, in the first place, has very little of this ancillary product. There are some sometimes there are these binder collection boxes, like 151 had a couple, right? Or gym trainer boxes and stuff like that. But there's very little of that product, and typically this product also only gets released in the very beginning of a new set. The reprints primarily come through the booster boxes that are then sold either sealed, mostly unsealed these days with pack limits, right? Whereas with English, you already have so much more of this ancillary product, collection boxes, tins, ETBs, check lane blisters, 3-pack blisters, sleeve boosters, all this stuff. You have so much different stuff in English, it's overwhelming. And it seems like, from what I've heard from people and kind of, absorbed over the last few weeks, months, watching content, is that a lot of the reprint stuff is coming through that kind of product. Costco bundles, stuff like that, right? And so it's possible that the booster boxes in English carry a bit of a premium because they might not get reprinted as much, and maybe less so these days than in the past, right? Whereas in Japan, the booster box is the main product. So that's a notable difference as well. Also, something to keep in mind, I think that's very important, is this sort of the new set hype for Japanese product in the West. So Japanese product is in a weird spot, the singles and the boxes, because when it's new and the English set hasn't come out yet, it's unbelievably popular in the West. Look at Inferno X, right? But then once the English set hits, the demand starts going down. And the older a Japanese set gets, typically, the less demand there is outside of Japan. That's why you have, with older boxes, you have such huge price differences. Sometimes between the Japanese market and the Western market. Just this morning, I watched a video from Bonnie Tastic, shout out. He talked about the fall of Dream League and how Dream League is doing so poorly over in the UK or in the West, whereas in Japan it went up by 50% this year, right? And so this is a weird thing with Japanese that's not comparable to the English cards and the English sets, that demand is highest for Japanese when the stuff is new, and then it kind of starts going down. There's some exceptions, maybe like 151, right? But yeah, this is an interesting difference, of course, to keep in mind. Here are maybe some counterclaims that people might make that I want to address. One thing I've heard people say before is, the Japanese boom wasn't organic. It was just a waifu boom. It was buy list manipulation from the stores. It was Chinese buyers doing weird stuff. I think I was able to demonstrate today that it wasn't just a waifu boom. Buy list manipulation was a thing back then? Maybe. There were certainly some insane buy list changes day after day after day, right? There's also a period when the market started crashing, all card stores just stopped buying slabs for about a week. That was crazy. But this kind of stuff, again, waifu boom, I was able to show it wasn't just a waifu boom. That the waifus mattered, they were a big deal, and they were front and center, I would argue, but it wasn't just a waifu boom. Manipulation and Chinese buyers. Is the English market not being manipulated right now? I mean, we're seeing all these buyouts of these random cards and all this stuff. Many people have talked about how relatively little money it takes to buy enough booster boxes on TCG Player to drive up the market price by $100. If your point is that Japanese manipulated, then you can't say English isn't being manipulated, in my opinion. Chinese buyers, there was a lot of Chinese buyers back then doing weird things. I think there was not too long ago a big Chinese buyer admitting on YouTube that they were chill bidding auctions on eBay, English auctions. So it's happening there too. And then there's just a general argument that I could see potentially pop up in the comments, referring back to these examples I gave right here, is that Japanese is so different that any comparison to English is pointless. And what I'll say to that is, yes, there are differences, which I showed earlier, the PSA 10 population, the main product differences, and sort of the demand curve for Japanese stuff in the West, right? But at the end of the day, it's still the same chase cards coming out of the packs that come out of the same sets. Maybe Japanese has, 2 sets instead of 1, but it's the same chase cards that people are after. People are in the hobby for the same reasons. The fundamentals are the same, right? People are buying for the same reasons. They're selling for the same reasons. It's people collecting, people investing, people flipping, people grading, full-time, part-time side hustle, people speculating, this and that, you name it, right? People are in the hobby, engaging within the hobby, in the space, with the cards for the same reasons. And that's, those are the fundamentals, and they are the same. They are identical. So it's good to acknowledge the difference. I think the differences, I think they matter, clearly. But I think more significantly, the fundamentals are the same. And very important as well, people are saying the same things. I think this is also something that matters, right? Although we have these differences, the things that people say, going back to maybe this slide right here, the things that people say are the same things that people said back when Japanese boomed before it crashed. Same thing. Right? So these sort of overarching bigger reasons are identical. Okay. Again, just saying the same things. It's the new norm. How can these possibly come back down to retail? They can't print enough. The crypto bros are here. More packs being ripped than ever. Exactly the same things people are saying about English today, they were saying about Japanese back then. It truly seemed hopeless for a while there. Like, how can Pokemon Japan possibly print enough to account for this international demand? They managed to do it, but also they didn't have to reprint everything, right? The same arguments. So let's get to my final thoughts. Once again, I'll repeat myself here. Obviously, I can't predict the future. But we can learn from the past. Maybe everything is different this time. It is very possible. I'm not here sitting here, yes, in a year from now, everything in English will be MSRP. It's not me. It's not who I am. It's not what I'm saying. It's not what I believe. It's very possible that things are different this time. But it is a bad idea to just ignore what happened in Japanese because the similarities are there. And it was very recent. This isn't some downturn that happened in the middle 2000s, right? This was 2.5 years ago. The same cards and boxes were being affected back then that are being affected right now. And the Japanese market is up again. Right? Things are going crazy again. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. What I will say though, and this is maybe another point that people might bring up, right, is like, well, look, everything's back up, so haha. But yes, that's true. Obviously, I'm not going to deny that the charts show it, but things were down for a while. And if you engage in this space as an investor, I'm talking to the investor bros now. Something being down or flat for 2 years, 2.5 years, it matters. It's not ideal. There are people with lots of money who can afford to sit on product for that long. They don't care. It's back up, great. Right? No one could have predicted that it went right back up. People speculated on it, I'm sure. And some people were right, obviously. But there are people who spent money, I'm just using VMAX Common as an example. There are people who spent money here on this box, right, who were probably pretty sad that they had to wait this long for the price to just get roughly back to where it was when they purchased it. That's a lot of money locked up in product, not doing anything. You could do so much with that money during that time. That's not ideal. And people are buying a lot of this stuff with money they don't have. And when you buy stuff with money that you don't have, something being stagnant, flat across 2.5 years or down for like 1.5 years, it's not good, right? It's not good. But those are the people who are watching those content creators. One thing as well I want to show, this is something I forgot to mention it earlier, but I think it's super interesting. We look at the crash, right? It happened in the middle of June. Prices for PSA 10s plummeted relatively quickly. The raw cards came down fast as well. A lot of the booster boxes during this time, where we're at, we're like around here, right? A lot of the booster boxes performed well. They stayed expensive. They went even up, right? This is June 16th. Starbirth went up when the PSA 10s were crashing down. VMAX Climax, Shiny Star V stayed about the same. VMAX Climax went up when the slabs were coming, crashing down. VMAX Climax got more expensive. A little bit down and more expensive again. What does this show? To me, it shows investors moving money from slabs into sealed, right? That's what's happening here. Maybe there's some collectors mixed in who are like, oh my God, I gotta buy it now before it goes too high, right? And there are probably collectors who bought at the peak who have never looked at the price again and just don't care. That's cool, right? But the box is getting more expensive while the slabs are coming crashing down. Shows me a lot of investors, speculators losing confidence in the slabs and moving that money into the sealed product. And so the sealed product performed pretty well for a while the market for slabs was, devastated. But eventually, even the sealed stuff couldn't hold. Right? Money moved here, people probably thinking, sealed, it's safe, right? It can only go up. Sealed doesn't go down, or not. If it goes down only a little bit, right? Then it comes right back up. The sealed stuff eventually came down significantly, as I've shown today. So I thought that was also quite interesting. Okay, I wanted to bring that up earlier, but I forgot. Back to my final thoughts. This is maybe the most important one. Not sharing what happened to Japanese cards during the time is, I think, irresponsible. This isn't me wanting to cause drama. It's not my goal. Like I said, I encourage comments. Everyone should be polite. I respect everyone's opinion. And I agree with a lot of the stuff that these very bullish people say as well. But when the messages are so, one-directional, and it's said with such conviction and such confidence, this cannot happen. How could this possibly happen? When we have the examples from Japan very recently, not explaining that to people, not sharing that with people is just irresponsible. And I think content creators, especially the big ones, ought to do better. People are called influencers for a reason. I don't like the term. I think it's cringe. I like content creator a lot more. But at the end of the day, content creators influence people. So, it is what it is. And when you have a big audience, a big following, a big fan base who listen to your every word, who will even go to other people's comments to defend you and this and that, right? When you have such a passionate follower base, many of whom are probably very smart with how they spend money in the hobby, but many who are probably spending money they don't have, right? You have a responsibility to give them as much information as possible. You can't give them all the information. Nobody has all the information. I don't have all the information. With the Japanese stuff, even though I was very in tune, I was here in Japan, I'm still here, right? I probably absorbed more of this boom and bust than most people outside of Japan. But I don't know everything. There's so much more that went on during that time. But I think people have a responsibility to give their audience as much information as possible. And I don't think there's any ill will here, even because a lot of these people are probably just not aware of what happened in Japanese. Maybe they've heard the same old story. Oh yeah, 1 month waifu boom, all manipulation. But there's so much more than that, as I've shown today. And I think a lot of people are just not aware. Maybe some people who are new to the hobby, which just weren't around, the people who paid attention to Japanese maybe just misremember it. Many people who have these types of channels, they aren't interested in Japanese. It's not what they do. So how could they be aware? Right? So I'm not saying there's any sort of malicious, motivation going on here, or nothing like that at all. But I think once you have a certain audience, a certain size, it really, truly, I think it applies to everyone. But especially if you have, tens of thousands of subscribers and thousands of people watch your videos, listening to you, and you're giving advice, financial advice, you have a responsibility to do the research to find out about this stuff. That's all I'm saying. That's my message here. And really, I hope my takeaway here is that, I want to motivate people to do their own research, to think outside the box, to not just listen to the opinions of a handful of creators who all say the same thing. You're likely missing out on some important information. Again, it's up to you. How relevant is this to you? It's up to you. To me, it's quite relevant. This does not mean that the same will happen to English. I think there are enough differences to make it at least a 50-50, if not lower odds it will happen to English. But it's relevant. It's important information because it directly contradicts some of these very strong statements that sound so convincing because the way they are presented. And so, yeah, I encourage people to do their own research and think for yourself and seek out opinions that might disagree with your general opinion or whatever. Anyways, wow, what a long video. My goodness. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure there's stuff I missed, and depending on what kind of comments I get, I might do a follow-up, or maybe a live stream would be fun to look at some of the comments and discuss things. I finally have very, very good internet in the Japanese countryside. Actually good, so this is amazing. So I could do some live streams now, but yeah, let me know what you thought. Again, I'm happy to welcome all opinions in the comments as long as people are polite. And I respect everyone's opinion myself. It doesn't matter whose channel they're coming from. As long as people are polite, I'm cool with everyone. All right, that's it. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and a thumbs up. Thank you very much for that. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.